Mike Sanders was savoring the night air as he strolled down a neon-lit street in downtown. The city buzzed around him, cars honked, people laughed, and music spilled out from the nearby bars and clubs. He was enjoying a rare night off, a simple pleasure for someone usually tangled in the demands of his security consultant role, a job that followed a decade in special forces. As he paused to buy a hot dog from a street vendor, the vendor nodded at him, saying, "Quiet night, huh?" "Yeah, too quiet for this city," Mike replied with a smirk, taking a bite of his hot dog. Suddenly, the ambient noises of chatter and traffic were drowned out by a strange humming sound, one that seemed to vibrate through the very ground beneath his feet. Mike's instincts kicked in. He scanned the area, looking for the source. His eyes caught a flicker of unnatural light in the dark sky above. Before he could react, a beam of light enveloped him. The last thing he saw was the street vendor's cart upturned as the vendor shouted in alarm. Then everything went black. When Mike awoke, he found himself in a stark room illuminated by a soft, pulsating light. The walls were smooth and metallic, and there wasn't a single familiar object in sight. He was lying on what seemed like a bench, not unlike those found in a medical facility. "You're awake," a voice echoed through the room. The tone was flat, emotionless. Mike sat up, his military training kicking in as he assessed his situation. He was alone, or so it seemed. "Who are you? Where am I?" he demanded, his voice calm but firm. A panel on one wall flickered and changed to a window, revealing a face that was decidedly not human. The creature had translucent skin through which blue veins pulsed, and its eyes were large and entirely black. "We are Xyloths from the planet Xyloth," the creature spoke, its mouth barely moving. "You have been brought here as part of a collection process. We travel the cosmos, gathering specimens from various worlds for study and recreation." Mike frowned, processing the information. "So, you kidnap people for fun, is that it?" The Xyloth seemed to consider his words. "It is one way to frame it. You are a specimen of interest, particularly because of your planet's rich history of conflict and survival." Standing up, Mike stepped closer to the window. "Well, you picked the wrong specimen. I'm not some lab rat you can poke and prod." The alien shifted, its eyes narrowing slightly. "We shall see, human. Your capabilities will be tested." Mike's eyes darted around, looking for any possible exit or item he could use to his advantage. "Let's get one thing straight. I don't plan on sticking around to be a part of your collection." The Xyloth chuckled, a low, disturbing sound. "Many have said that, yet here you remain. We shall see how long your defiance lasts." As the window panel turned opaque again, Mike clenched his fists. He wasn't just going to escape. He was going to make these aliens regret ever setting foot on Earth. With a deep breath, he began to explore his confines, his mind racing through potential plans of action. The game was on, and he was not about to play by their rules. The room Mike was confined in seemed devoid of any typical exit. No doors, no visible vents, only seamless walls that offered no clues. His attempts to communicate further with his captors were met with silence, leaving him in frustrating isolation. He settled into a corner, conserving his energy while keeping his senses alert for any changes. After what felt like hours, the wall opposite him shimmered and a section slid open noiselessly, revealing a corridor lit by the same, soft, pulsating light. A figure appeared, the same Xyloth he had seen earlier, its slender form framed by the doorway. "Come," it said simply, gesturing for Mike to follow. Reluctant but curious, Mike stepped into the corridor, his eyes scanning every inch of his new surroundings for anything that might be useful later. As they walked, the Xyloth began to speak, its voice a monotone that echoed slightly in the narrow space. "Our civilization thrives on knowledge and experience from across the universe. Your Earth is particularly intriguing due to its environmental and biological diversity." Mike kept his face neutral, listening. "And the people? What do you do with them after you're done studying them?" The Xyloth paused, turning to face him with its emotionless gaze. "They are returned, usually. The process enhances our understanding and often improves the specimen's own knowledge." "Returned, huh?" Mike replied skeptically. "And they just go back to their lives as if nothing happened?" "In most cases, yes," the Xyloth answered. "Your species has a remarkable capacity for resilience. Many adapt and continue." The corridor ended at a large chamber filled with panels of glowing controls and screens displaying star charts and biological data. The center of the room held a suspended animation chamber, its contents obscured by frosted glass. "This is the control room of our ship," the Xyloth explained. "From here, we navigate the cosmos and manage our collections." Mike eyed the technology, noting the layout and any visible interfaces. "You kidnap people from all over the galaxy, and you think it's justified because it's for your understanding?" he challenged, his tone hardening. "We do not expect you to understand fully," the Xyloth responded, a flicker of what might have been annoyance crossing its features. "But yes, we believe it is a small price for a greater good." "Good for you, maybe," Mike shot back, "but you're messing with lives. People aren't specimens to be collected. You'll find that humans don't take kindly to being poked, prodded, or played with." The Xyloth regarded him for a moment longer before the conversation was interrupted by a soft alert from one of the panels. "It seems your presence has already begun to offer us valuable insights," it said, turning away to attend to the alert. As Mike was led back to his room, his mind raced. The arrogance of the Xyloth was clear, but so was their technological advancement. He needed a plan, not just to escape but also to put a stop to their abductions, for his sake and potentially many others. His resolve hardened. This wasn't just about survival now, it was about sabotage. Back in his confined room, Mike paced slowly, processing every detail of the control room he had just seen. The layout, the alien tech, it was all unfamiliar, yet his training had prepared him to adapt quickly. He needed a plan, not just to escape, but to undermine the Xyloth operation. He thought about the systems he had glimpsed on the screens. If he could cause a malfunction, even briefly, it might give him the opening he needed. The next time the door to his room shimmered open, it wasn't the same Xyloth that entered, but a different one, shorter, with darker veins pulsing under its translucent skin. It carried a tray of what passed for food, setting it down with a clatter. "Eat," it instructed. "You will need your strength." Mike looked at the alien, a plan forming. "Listen, I need to speak to someone in charge. There's something about Earth you need to know. Something dangerous that could affect your ship." The Xyloth paused, interest piqued. "Explain." "I can't talk about it here. It's sensitive information, could be disastrous if I'm right," Mike pressed, watching the alien's reaction closely. After a moment's hesitation, the Xyloth nodded. "I will arrange for you to speak with the commander." Once the creature left, Mike sat down to eat, keeping his strength up as he had been advised. He used the mealtime to think through his story, fabricating a credible threat from Earth that would necessitate his access to the ship's central systems. A few hours later, he was escorted back to the control room, where he met a taller, more authoritative-looking Xyloth, who regarded him with a cool, calculating gaze. "You claim there is a threat?" the commander asked. "Yes," Mike said, feigning concern. "Earth has various defense mechanisms, some biological, that could be triggered by your scans. It's a defensive response to alien tech. It's why we've managed to stay off the radar for so long." The commander exchanged a glance with another Xyloth before turning back to Mike. "Show us what must be done." Mike stepped forward, approaching the central console. "I'll need to access your scanning subsystems. I can input the override codes to prevent any accidental triggering of these defenses." The Xyloth hesitated, but eventually agreed, allowing Mike to approach the controls. As he pretended to input codes, Mike subtly inserted a small, makeshift device he had crafted from materials in his room, nothing sophisticated, but enough to cause a short in the system. Minutes after he stepped back, the console flickered and screens began to shut down. "What have you done?" the commander demanded, alarm in its voice. "Just a precaution," Mike assured, feigning innocence. "It should reboot in a few minutes, bypassing Earth's defensive triggers. You'll be able to continue safely." As the Xyloths focused on the malfunctioning console, Mike slipped away, moving quickly back through the corridors he had memorized earlier. With the Xyloths distracted, he began his real work, sabotaging other critical systems and freeing the other captives he'd learned were held on the ship. It was time to rally allies and take control. Once free from the watchful eyes of the Xyloths, Mike moved stealthily through the ship's labyrinthine corridors. His military training provided him the skills needed to evade detection as he sought out the holding areas for other captives. Each step took him deeper into the alien ship, revealing more about the complex layout and technology that powered it. His initial sabotage had caused more disruption than he anticipated. Lights flickered overhead, and distant alarms pulsed, adding a layer of chaos that worked in his favor. Mike used the disarray to cover his movements, slipping past distracted Xyloth crew members who were scrambling to address the system failures. As he navigated the ship, Mike stumbled upon a detention area where several alien species were held captive. Each cell was sealed with an energy barrier, but the control systems appeared similar to those he had manipulated in the control room. Approaching the first cell, he found a creature that looked like a bipedal feline, its fur matted and eyes wary. "Hey, I'm here to get you out." "Do you understand me?" Mike whispered. The creature nodded, understanding evident in its eyes. "Yes, I understand," it responded in surprisingly clear English, voice tinged with a growl. "How can we escape?" Mike quickly explained his plan to overload the cell's control panel as he had done with the ship's main systems. Working together, they managed to disable the energy barrier, freeing the feline-like creature and several others. Among the freed captives was Leary, the telepathic creature from earlier discussions. Leary's abilities could facilitate silent communication among the group, a crucial advantage. Mike coordinated with Leary, establishing a mental link to guide the group stealthily back to the ship's central systems. However, their escape did not go unnoticed. As more systems began to fail and captives were freed, the Xyloth security forces mobilized, turning the ship into a hunting ground with Mike and his newfound allies as the prey. The ship's internal security drones were deployed, forcing Mike to adapt his tactics. He led the group through less frequented maintenance shafts and service tunnels, areas not covered by the usual surveillance. Each encounter with Xyloth forces became a skirmish, with Mike using non-lethal tactics to incapacitate them. His goal was escape, not harm. "We need to reach the engine control room," Mike communicated through Leary. "If we can take control of the ship's propulsion, we can steer ourselves out of here." The group encountered stiff resistance as they neared their objective. A tense battle ensued in a narrow corridor lined with pipes and cables. Mike and the others used the environment to their advantage, setting up ambushes and creating obstacles to slow their pursuers. After a grueling fight, they reached the engine control room. The door was sealed, and several Xyloths were stationed outside, unaware of the approaching group. Mike signaled for quiet, preparing for what might be their most crucial confrontation yet. "Once we're in," Mike projected his thoughts through Leary, ensuring everyone was on the same page. "We secure the room and initiate a course change. Our destination, back to Earth, or at least out of their reach. Everyone ready?" Nods and mental affirmations answered him. The group readied themselves, poised to take control of their fates. The door would open soon, and their chance at freedom would hinge on what happened next. With the engine control room door in their sights, Mike signaled for the group to hold position while he assessed the situation. The tension was palpable. They all knew the importance of the next few minutes. Using a small mirror, Mike peeked around the corner to observe the Xyloth guards, noting their positions and movements. 3 guards, standard patrol rotations. We can take them by surprise," Mike communicated through Leary, who relayed his thoughts to the rest of the group. Their silent communication was proving to be an invaluable asset. The plan was simple, yet risky. Use a diversion to draw the guards away from their post, then swiftly move in to secure the room. One of the captives, a nimble and small alien named Keith, volunteered to create the distraction due to his speed and agility. As Keith darted down a connecting corridor, clattering loudly as if in panic, the guards immediately pursued the noise, weapons drawn. "Now," Mike whispered, leading the charge towards the now unguarded door. Leary, positioned at the rear, focused intensely to maintain the telepathic link as they moved. The door was unlocked, surprisingly, a sign of the Xyloth's arrogance in their security measures. They slipped inside and quickly secured the door behind them. The engine control room was a vast chamber filled with humming machinery and blinking consoles, a nerve center of the ship. "We need to find the navigation controls," Mike said, scanning the room for the appropriate workstation. A creature from a tech-savvy species, known as a Savari, stepped forward. "Allow me, I have experience with these systems," it offered, its voice a series of chirps and whistles that Leary translated for the group. While the Savari worked on accessing the ship's navigation, Mike and the others prepared defenses in case of a counterattack. Barricades were erected using spare parts and equipment from around the room, and positions were assigned to cover the entry points. Minutes later, the Savari chirped triumphantly. "Navigation control is overridden. I can set a course for anywhere you wish." "Set it for Earth's solar system. We'll figure out the exact destination once we're clear of any immediate pursuit," Mike decided, knowing that the first priority was to get out of Xyloth space. Just as the new course was set, alarms blared throughout the ship, a stark warning that their actions had been discovered. "They know. Prepare for a fight," Mike warned, checking his improvised weapon. As if on cue, the door to the engine room shuddered under the impact of Zealoth forces trying to breach it. Mike positioned himself beside the door, ready to use the element of surprise to their advantage. Leary stood close, her abilities not only keeping the group connected, but also ready to disorient any invaders with psychic blasts. The door burst open, and a surge of Zealoth soldiers stormed in. The room erupted into chaos, with Mike and his allies defending their hard-won position. Each captive used their unique abilities to fend off the attackers. Keith zipped through the Zealoth's ranks, creating confusion, while others provided covering fire with captured Zealoth weapons. After intense combat, the attackers were repelled, and the door was sealed once more. Breathing heavily, Mike checked on his team. "Everyone okay?" Nods and affirmative murmurs filled the room, though many were nursing injuries. Despite the victory, it was clear they weren't out of danger yet. The ship was still deep in space, and more challenges awaited them. "Let's keep moving," Mike urged, determination clear in his voice. "We have a long journey ahead, and I promise you we're going to make it back home." With the engine room secured and the ship's course set toward Earth's solar system, Mike's group knew they had a brief reprieve to prepare for the next wave of challenges. They fortified their position, using whatever they could find within the room to strengthen their defenses and treat injuries. "We need to be ready for anything," Mike stated, looking over to Leary and the others. "They'll come at us harder now." Leary nodded, her telepathic abilities buzzing with the tension of the moment. "I can sense confusion and anger throughout the ship. They didn't expect us to fight back this hard, or at all." Keith, the agile alien who had helped with the diversion earlier, chimed in, his voice a series of quick, sharp clicks. "We should strike while they are disorganized, take control of more of the ship." Mike considered this for a moment. "It's risky, but if we can take over the communications room, we might be able to send a distress signal to nearby space traffic. It could increase our chances of rescue." The plan set, they split into two teams. Mike led the first team to secure the communications room, while the second team, led by a robust and strategically minded alien named Gorvath, stayed behind to hold the engine room. Navigating through the ship's corridors was less of a stealth operation now, and more of a calculated assault. With each encounter, Mike's team efficiently neutralized the Zealoth resistance, their blend of unique alien abilities and Mike's tactical expertise proving too much for the unprepared ship crew. Upon reaching the communications room, they faced stiff resistance. Zealoth security had set up a blockade, anticipating their move. Mike surveyed the area, then turned to his team. "We'll need a distraction. Keith, can you—" "Already on it," Keith interrupted, already moving into position with his characteristic speed. As Keith drew the guards away, Mike led the remaining team members in a swift, decisive breach. They entered the communications room, quickly overcoming the few guards left behind. "Get a message out, any standard distress frequency," Mike ordered a Sci-Fi team member, who immediately began interfacing with the complex Zealoth communication systems. Meanwhile, back in the engine room, Gorvath and his team faced increasing attempts by the Zealoths to reclaim control. But Gorvath, using his experience in military tactics from his homeworld, set up a layered defense that repelled each assault, causing heavy casualties to the Zealoth forces. Back in the communications room, the Sci-Fi specialist finally broke through the encryption. "Sending distress signal now," he announced, his fingers dancing over the alien controls. "Message sent. I've included our coordinates and a brief explanation of our situation," he continued, a tone of hope in his synthesized voice. Just as the message went out, an alert sounded through the ship, a stark, clanging bell that signaled their actions had not gone unnoticed. "They know we're here and what we're trying to do," Mike realized. "We need to prepare for a major counterattack." As the team braced for more fighting, Mike felt a deep resolve settle in. Despite the odds, they had managed to unite as a formidable force. He looked around at the diverse faces of his team, each from vastly different corners of the universe, all fighting together for a common cause. "We've come this far together. Let's see this through to the end," Mike rallied the group, his voice firm and confident. "For our freedom and the right to return home." The team members nodded in agreement, bolstered by Mike's leadership and their shared determination to fight for their survival and for each other. In the wake of sending out the distress signal, Mike and his eclectic crew fortified their positions, expecting the Zealoth's counterattack to be swift and fierce. Mike paced the communications room, every sense on high alert. "Keep monitoring those frequencies," he instructed the Sci-Fi technician. "Any response to our distress call, you shout it out." Outside the communications room, the ship hummed with tension. Mike's allies, positioned strategically throughout the corridor, communicated through Leary's telepathy, maintaining a silent, invisible network of alerts and commands. The expected onslaught began with a barrage of energy fire against the communications room door. Mike's team returned fire with captured Xyloth weapons, the confined space turning into a cacophony of blasts and orders shouted over the din. "Hold the line!" Mike yelled, as he took down an advancing Xyloth with a precise shot. Beside him, Leary focused her energy, projecting a wave of disorientation towards the invaders, slowing their progress. Amid the chaos, a crackle came through the communication system. The Sci-Fi technician waved frantically at Mike. "We've got a response! A Coalition patrol ship received our distress. They're en route!" Mike nodded, firing another shot as he replied, "How long?" "Less than 15 minutes, but there's a problem." The Sci-Fi clicked rapidly. They caution that the Xyloths are broadcasting a territorial claim. The Coalition needs authorization to intervene directly. Cursing under his breath, Mike realized they needed to buy time and somehow negotiate help. "Tell them we're political refugees seeking asylum. It might expedite their decision." As the technician sent the message, Mike turned back to the defense of the room. The door was beginning to buckle under the continuous assault. "We just need to hold out a little longer," he encouraged his team. The door finally gave way, and a wave of Xyloths surged forward. The room erupted into hand-to-hand combat, with Mike and his team desperately fighting back against overwhelming odds. Just as the situation seemed dire, a sudden deep rumble shook the ship. For a moment the fighting paused, both sides turning to steady themselves. Another rumble followed, this time accompanied by the sound of heavy artillery. "It's the Coalition. They're engaging the Xyloths outside," shouted the Sci-Fi, relief evident in his voice. Emboldened by the news, Mike rallied his team. "Push them back. We have help now. Let's finish this." With renewed vigor, the captives drove the remaining Xyloth forces out of the communications room, securing it once again. Mike, breathing heavily, looked around at his battered but unbeaten team. Moments later, a new voice crackled over the communication system, authoritative and calm. "This is Commander Ryle of the Galactic Coalition. We have your position secured, preparing to board and assist." Relief washed over Mike as he responded. "Understood, Commander. We're ready for extraction." The next few minutes were a blur as Coalition forces boarded the ship, quickly taking control from the disoriented Xyloth crew. Commander Ryle, a tall, imposing figure, entered the communications room, offering Mike a nod of respect. "You've done well to protect your crew and handle this situation, Mr. Sanders. We'll ensure you and your companions are returned safely to your respective homes." As the Coalition forces began the process of securing the ship and treating the injured, Mike allowed himself a moment to relax. Looking out a nearby porthole at the stars zooming past, he felt a profound sense of accomplishment and anticipation. Home was within reach, and soon he would be able to step foot on Earth again, this time with stories that sounded like they were from another universe entirely. As the Coalition ship charted its course back to Earth, Mike sat in the medical bay, getting his minor injuries treated. The quiet hum of the ship and the soft beeps from the medical equipment were a stark contrast to the chaos of just hours before. Around him, his fellow escapees were also receiving care, their expressions a mix of relief and exhaustion. Commander Ryle entered the bay, her presence commanding yet reassuring. "We're on a direct course for Earth, Mr. Sanders. You should be home in a few hours," she informed him with a nod. "Thank you, Commander," Mike replied, genuinely grateful. "And the others?" "They will be taken to their respective home planets. The Coalition has protocols for such situations." "They'll be safe," Ryle assured him. Mike nodded, satisfied. His thoughts drifted to the team he had formed spontaneously, a group of strangers from across the galaxy who had fought side by side for their freedom. He felt a pang of sadness at the thought of saying goodbye, but knew each had their own life to return to. As Earth came into view, a beautiful blue orb suspended in the starry expanse, Mike felt an overwhelming surge of emotion. The planet had never looked so inviting. He watched in silence, reflecting on his incredible journey. The Coalition ship landed smoothly in a secure government facility. Mike was met by officials and debriefed extensively. His story was extraordinary, but the evidence from the Xyloth ship, including the testimonies of the Coalition forces, corroborated his account. Once the formalities were concluded, Mike was free to go. Stepping outside, he breathed in the fresh Earth air. It was sweet and familiar. He looked around, seeing the world as if for the first time. Despite the ordeal, he felt a renewed sense of purpose and a deeper appreciation for his home. In the days that followed, Mike kept in touch with the Coalition about the safe return of his fellow escapees to their home planets. Each was successfully reintegrated, and they occasionally communicated through messages, sharing updates and well wishes. Life gradually returned to normal, but Mike was not the same. He had seen the vastness of the cosmos, encountered beings from other worlds, and faced challenges no training could have prepared him for. He knew Earth was just a small part of a much larger community of planets, each with its own struggles and stories. One evening, as he watched a sunset, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Leary, the telepathic alien who had become a close friend. "Thinking of the stars, are you?" it read, a hint of amusement in its mental voice. Mike smiled, typing back, "Always. It's a big universe out there, but it's good to be home." As he sent the message, he felt a profound connection to the vast, mysterious universe and to the tiny, vibrant planet that he called home. He knew he would always look up at the stars with wonder and respect, ready for whatever adventure might come next.